Where do monster hunters come from? Why are some hunters so seemingly average while other hunters go toe-to-toe with world-ending dragons and come out on top? I've heard some people say it's the planet's gravity. I've heard others say that it's the food that they eat. But neither of those explain the difference in power between all the hunters. In reality, there's only one reason that would answer all of these questions and make sense. It's how they were made. Let me explain. For those of you who don't know, Monster Hunter games take place in a post-apocalyptic world where ancient civilizations once sprawled the entire planet and had domain over the monsters. They were so technologically advanced that they figured out how to even make life itself from scratch. And that is where our story begins. The ancient civilizations were a brilliant but brutal people, unlike the Hunters Guild we know today. They had started using monsters as tools for their own benefit, such as for security or for construction. And I don't mean monster excavators here. I mean they hunted monsters down to use their scales, hide, and bones as literal construction materials to make their massive, towering structures out of. Their buildings were monster graveyards. They also used monsters for experimentation, and this path is what led them to what's called the Forbidden Act. The ancient civilizations had pushed science so far that they made their own version of the Frankenstein's monster called the Equal Dragon Weapon. This monstrosity was created by taking the body parts of hundreds of mature dragons, piecing it together and giving it life with the sole purpose of hunting more monsters to feed their conquest of the planet they lived on. This abomination sparked what's called the Great Dragon War. Now faced with a global war and under relentless assault of wave after wave of hordes of monsters, the ancient kingdom needed a newer and more efficient way to fight back, as the Equal Dragon Weapon was both too expensive and took too long to keep up with the war effort. They needed something that could be mass-produced, or ideally, they needed something that could reproduce. Different kingdoms took different approaches to solving this problem. Wyveria created Guardians and later made Zoshia, which at the time seemed like a failure when it came to reproducing and were difficult, if not impossible, to control and use effectively. And in the case of Zoshia, we know that lack of control led to a catastrophic failure where Zoshia destroyed the ancient kingdom from within. But a different, unknown kingdom took a different approach to solving this problem: hunter cells. They fused together the strongest genetic potential of all the creatures this world had to offer, the raw strength of Rajang, the fire resistance from Rathalos, and more, and used it to create the perfect being capable of going toe-to-toe with any monster this world had to offer. They created heroes, beings that would naturally blend into society, protectors that would fight for their cause, not because they were told to, but because they believed in it. They were one of them. Then, taking these hunter cells and using raw, concentrated bioenergy as a genetic catalyst, they took all the greatest strengths the world had to offer and merged them with fertilized embryos of unborn children and felines. The bioenergy allowed the hunter cells to merge with their DNA and imbue these babies with great power, turning them into unstoppable forces of unnatural strength. In order for it to work, this process had to start from scratch. A brand new life form. Children created as weapons, but raised as people. When these babies were born, the children and felines were imprinted together, creating a lifelong bond, and they immediately began training under the watchful gaze of their handler and the greatest warriors that their army had to offer. The nature of their great power was kept a secret both from them and from society. This would prevent them from being treated differently and becoming outcasts, as well as making sure they didn't start to view themselves as above normal people, creating a god complex and a new enemy that could destroy themselves from within, like Wyveria. This brought successful integration into society, forming a sense of loyalty and an innate desire to use their strength to protect those around them, as well as to create relationships and to reproduce. This would allow hunter cells to spread naturally through procreation, raising the entire species to a new level, where future generations would be able to protect themselves with their own power. No more need to create uncontrollable, expensive beasts. They are the beasts. Now, when these children grew, their power was just attributed to their lifelong, intense training regimen, and when they finally reached the appropriate age, they were given the title Dragon Hunters. And as these dragon hunters came of age and entered the war, they realized it wasn't enough. The ancient civilization crumbled, and with it, any evidence or knowledge of the hunter cells and their origins. The remaining survivors of both the hunters and normal people went off to escape destruction and find a way to start life anew. They created a guild to concentrate their efforts and protect everyone. Everyone had a job and a role, and nobody was left out. The strong were hunters, everybody else were support. Generation after generation, hunter cells would spread and create a new era where people were born with heightened strength and abilities. This naturally led to branches of families where some had more concentrated levels of hunter cells than others. When a normal person has a child with a hunter, and when a hunter has a child with another hunter, and so on. Hunters kept getting assigned handlers as a continued tradition, and they kept their bond with palicos, leading to the guild that we know of today. A guild that works to balance nature rather than abuse it, avoiding the downfall of their ancestors. This perfectly explains the gap in power between different hunters and why some hunters can take on threats that some can't even begin to handle. They come from families that have a higher concentration and less diluted level of hunter cells. That's why the strongest hunters, the one you and I play, can do what no one else can do. We are no mere hunters. We're pure-blooded echoes of a long-forgotten super weapon.